Not yet.
Our seminar series. I'm Sue Flockey, and I'm an Associate Director at the Prevention Research Center for Healthy Neighborhoods here at Case Western Reserve University. To those of you who have not been here before, welcome. It's nice to see some new faces. This is a monthly seminar that we have where we talk about projects and emerging projects, recent findings and issues relevant to prevention and health promotion. There's a sign-up sheet outside. If you didn't sign up, please do that. We like to track who's coming and how many folks are attending our sessions so we can plan forward, but also so that we can invite you to come and let you know about future events. Upcoming events. Next month, May, we have two special sessions. One is on social network analysis, where international expert Tom Valente is coming. He will be giving a public talk on the 6th, I believe. Let me double check that, May 7th. And if you check on the PRC website, you can link into some additional information on that. But I believe that the public talk is at noon. I'll double check. It is on the 7th. Check the website. And it will be over on campus, main campus. The other presentation that you may be interested in May is David Wetter, who is coming from Rice University. He also has affiliation with MD Anderson, who will be talking on disparities in tobacco, and tobacco use and harms of tobacco. And that talk will be on May 1st, which is a Friday. It'll be at noon, and I believe it'll be in the Biomedical Research Building. That's the Clock Tower building and their main auditorium. And again, you can get to a link and additional information about that presentation on the PRC website. So today's speaker, I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to introduce Dr. Dan Remley. He is coming from the Ohio State Extension in Columbus, and he has a series of research that is going on around food pantries, and in particular the Choice Pantry program that he's going to tell us a little bit about today. And I know that there's several folks here who have a keen interest in that area and have some of their own projects going on. And I just learned this morning that Dan is already engaged with Darcy Friedman and the activities underneath the umbrella of the Fresh Link program, one of the main projects for the PRC. So there's a lot of connections here and certainly a lot of interest in this. So without further ado, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks. How are you all doing today?
Good.
I'm glad that I'm not preventing you from having lunch. Sometimes it's hard if you're speaking before lunch. Everybody wants to. So feel free to to continue eating. And my name is Dan Remley. And can everybody hear me in the back? Okay. Okay. I have sort of a soft voice, so I really have to make an effort to project my voice, and my wife tells me that quite a bit too when we just communicate. But my name is I'm a field specialist for Ohio State University Extension. So I am also assistant professor, and so I'm faculty, but I don't teach traditional classes, and I do a lot of community education. So I give talks like this. I work on projects, but I'm not a sort of a traditional faculty member. So, but I do work under the College of Food and Agriculture and Environmental Sciences in the Department of Extension. And so, those of you who know anything about Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, it is the flagship, it is the land-grant university. And so we have extension offices in every county of the state. How many of you knew that? Ohio State has an office in every county. I know you probably have heard the regional campuses. So you probably have heard of us if you grew up, probably, I'm guessing, in some of the smaller rural counties if you were in 4-H. Maybe you were in a larger county and were in 4-H, but that's kind of what we're best known for. We do youth development. But we also do, we work a lot with the agriculture community, and we work with gardeners through our horticulture program. We have a program called Master Gardeners. And I know Master Gardeners are real active here in Cuyahoga County with the Urban Garden program. So if you're a gardener and you have a problem with a bug eating your tomatoes, you can call the extension office and we'll help you out, hopefully. I work in the area of family and consumer sciences, and so traditionally that's sort of known as home economics, but we've evolved to become family and consumer sciences. And so under that umbrella, not only involves the health programs that a lot of us work on, but also parenting education. A lot of our extension educators around the state do co-parenting education, for example. Some extension educators work on financial education too. So there's a lot of opportunities. I know some of you are students that we have positions open. Just kind of want to plant that seed in your minds, okay? And also, I always have to talk about extension because not many people know what we do. So I have a public health background. Did my master's in public health at UAB, Alabama, Birmingham, and then did my doctorate in nutrition. I became interested in public health and nutrition. I was 20 years old at Miami University, and I developed type 1 diabetes. And so that was a life-changing event. And so I thought, how am I going to manage this disease, and how at the same time, maybe I can help others as well. So I do a lot of diabetes education around the state as well. I was introduced to the choice food pantry idea when I was working in Butler County Extension Educator in Family and Consumer Sciences. And the Shared Harvest Foodbank was working on an initiative to develop choice pantries. And so I just kind of jumped in on that coalition and helped them develop the rainbow of colors choice food pantry model. So today I'm going to talk about some of my experiences working with choice food pantries and also food councils that can support the food pantries, and address some of the issues that relate to health and food insecurity. I think we'll have time for questions at the end too. So I've got a lot of slides to kind of get through, but then we'll open up to questions. Let's see.
Not doing its thing. Jacob, yeah. It's not doing what it should be doing.
That's okay. I can.
All right, you want to hit end? You hit end on the screen.
Okay. Wonder we can.
It's
Okay, good.
a very big file, I think.
Okay. So yeah, I think I have some animation built in. That's probably why it's taking so long. So today we're going to explore the relationship between food insecurity and health a little bit. And then under that context, we'll talk about the Rainbow of Colors choice system. There's lots of different, we'll talk generally about choice pantries. There's advantages and disadvantages, the choice pantry model, but then the Rainbow of Colors system and its opportunities to improve dietary quality and health. And but also addresses long-term food insecurity. So finally, we're going to discuss community food councils and their opportunities to collectively address healthy food access, food insecurity, and support the work of choice food pantries. That's right. So just briefly talk about food insecurity. There's actually quite a bit of misunderstanding about what food insecurity actually is. It's not necessarily hunger. So you can be food insecure, but you're not necessarily hungry. Hunger is actually a physical sensation that you have. Food insecurity, on the other hand, is a situation where you have limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, or limited or uncertain ability to acquire acceptable foods in socially acceptable ways. And so I underlined that because I think that's often forgotten, is the socially acceptable ways. We talk about having enough food or not having enough food, but being able to acquire them in socially acceptable ways, and that's according to your culture. Okay, so we'll talk more about that. So as you know, we do have a food insecurity problem here in Ohio. I think we were ranked like number 8 or something like that in terms of all the states. Today it's about almost 20% of people that are considered food insecure, and it's gone up since the 1990s. It continues to go up. And they determine food insecurity by, basically it's about a 20-question survey, and they ask, whether or not you run out of money at the end of the month, if you're cutting back on portions, those types of questions. Or do you have enough money to afford to have a balanced diet? And so based on how you respond to those questions, you're categorized into different levels of food insecurity. There's like very low food insecurity, food insecure, and so forth, food secure. So food insecurity is on the rise here in Ohio. It has been since the 90s. What we also know is that some food insecure populations, and this is where I get a little nervous because I know some of you epidemiologists are probably more versed in this research and this literature than I am, but some food insecure populations have low dietary quality and are especially vulnerable to becoming overweight and developing some of these chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes. There's some research suggesting, independent of one's education and income, if you're food insecure, you're twice as likely to develop type 2 diabetes, with women mostly. There is some controversy. There's some link, sort of a paradoxical link between food insecurity and obesity in some populations, especially with women. But I will say too that this is a little bit of it's a little bit controversial because you'll see studies suggesting that it is, and then some studies suggesting that it's not. But the bottom line is that obesity is a problem no matter what your education, what your income level. Diabetes is a problem everywhere, okay? And it's really important that when I talk to a food pantry director or a food bank director, that there is this, I don't know if you two have encountered this with some of your food pantry directors. There's a little bit of a mindset, or at least has been in the past, about food pantries and foods that sort of mentality of food pantry directors. There's kind of this mentality that we need to fill bellies. It doesn't matter what foods we provide, we need to fill bellies. That's the most important thing. Another mentality is that I kind of call it the clean plate club. How many know what the clean plate club is? You know, you eat everything that's on your plate. You don't, and so the food pantries kind of have this mentality too. No matter what foods we receive from Kroger or Panera or restaurants, we need to shovel that food into people's carts or put it in the boxes or bags. Doesn't matter what kind of food it is. Doesn't matter the nutritional quality. Just get rid of it. Okay, so those are two mentalities that sometimes you'll run into when you work with hunger relief or food pantries, soup kitchens, those types of things. So the point is that yes, it's important to fill bellies, but fill bellies with healthy, nutrient-dense foods. So why do we have a problem with food insecurity? And why do people that are food insecure have lower diet quality? Any ideas? Any reasons?
More nutrient-dense food that's less expensive.
Okay. Nutrient-dense food?
Not nutrient-dense, calorie-dense.
Calorie-dense, okay, yeah. And there's quite a bit of research that suggests that as well. Now, as a nutritionist, and those of you in the nutrition area, you can eat healthy on a limited budget, but it takes more know-how. It takes a lot more knowledge. And that's where SNAP education becomes really important as well, to teach people how to eat healthy on a very limited budget. Yeah?
And there's also a lot of messaging and marketing targeted to particular socioeconomic constituents, which
Sure.
also enhances those choices.
Right, right. So you're probably familiar with the food desert research and all that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it is, yes, I'm sorry?
I found out that in teaching with kids that they have told me that it's not that it's the money that's the problem, it's that they don't, it's where it's easier and it's known for them to pick this instead of picking that.
Right.
That's right. They just know that this is what mama always picked, where I have taught them that this is what they should pick. It costs the same, it's going to be the same, but they know that this is what mom's going to pick instead of picking this.
Right. So that's a good point. You're influenced by your parents.
Right.
As you get older, you're more so your friends. But that's a good lead into my next. It's a complex problem, and so some of you have probably seen this model. This is the social ecological model. And so what the social ecological model says is that our behaviors as individuals are influenced by lots of different things in our environments, but also those interpersonal factors, like what you were saying. We're influenced by our parents at a very early age. Okay, we're influenced by our friends and our coworkers. All our communities, our families, we're all embedded. We all go to school. We all work in workplaces, and so those environments can influence our health behaviors. Okay, and even the community. You know, what's available in the community, what stores are available, whether there's food pantries available in the community, what's in those stores. Those can influence what we consume and how we consume those. If there's public transportation, can we get to the stores? Okay, and then certainly the very top here, what affects everything is policy. So you know, in the case of access to healthy foods, of course, you know what's available in the food pantries can influence what people are consuming. Okay. You know, can they get to the food pantries within the community? Policy, certainly the school lunch program really was introduced right after World War II, and that's a major policy that has influenced food insecurity and has helped a lot of kids not go hungry. Now, what's important in this model, though, is that the influences are bidirectional. So, in other words, individuals you can influence your friends and your families. You can influence what's available in your workplaces or your schools. You can influence what's available in your communities in terms of healthy food access and that type of thing. As we'll see, what's really important in the interventions is that we listen to individuals, and so individuals are engaged in policy systems and environmental work. This becomes especially important in food pantries in choice food pantries, because when the traditional pantries we see moves to a choice model, you really have to be in tune with what their needs are and what their preferences are. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of food just sitting on the counters, and it'll never be consumed. But also, you have to know, you know, what people have, what type of equipment do they have at home? You know, do they have bread knives, for example, to cut? We were in one pantry in Middletown. They got this big shipment of Panera bread, and they had it on the shelves, but none of the clients were taking this bread, and the volunteers couldn't figure out why. You know, it turns out the clients didn't have bread knives at home, and so if you ever try to cut one of these big loaves of bread with a steak knife, you can't do it. And so that's why talking to clients, engaging with clients, is really, really important. There's a lot of criticism now of the food desert work, where they try to plop a grocery store right in the middle of the food desert and think that the grocery store is going to become successful. And really, what they probably have failed to do in the intervention is actually engage the community, talk to the community. You plop a grocery store right in the middle of a food desert, and everybody know what a food desert is? Anybody not? Okay. So you plop a grocery store right in the middle of a food desert, and without talking to people, you find out that crime is probably the bigger issue, and so that needs to be tackled first. Or maybe people just aren't motivated to eat healthy. Maybe they're getting their foods somewhere else. So it's really important that in interventions, it's important to engage the target audience and not just try to impact one of these different levels and expect sort of that trickle-down economics. Yep.
Don't you think you should involve the cook, the preparation of the food?
Sure.
Yeah. Just the
Right, so that's that interpersonal. So if it's a child, the parent, absolutely. I have to change here. So again, we're influenced by our environments. I counted this slide. I showed every presentation. We live in a very sedentary, we're engineered to be very sedentary, right? Our environments really do support sedentary types of behaviors. And with the stairs, you may have, some interventions have been sort of successful where they've actually painted the stairs like a keyboard, and the key, if you walk up the stairs, it makes noise. So there's little tricks where you can get people to take the stairs instead of the elevator. Healthy produce, fresh produce, the price since in the past couple decades has skyrocketed. And you can see the since I think this was since 1990, the percentage increase of fresh produce has risen by about 20%. Those highly processed foods, the price has increased by only about 20%. I think this is going to get worse. As you know, we're having droughts out in California. We're going to see what that does to produce prices. Now, this is fresh produce. You can eat healthy, canned, and frozen as well. So that's not really reflected here, but that's an interesting. That's a Seligman study, New England Journal of Medicine, 2010. So economics do not always. This is sort of a controversial area as well, but there's a lot of economists argue that one reason for our obesity problem is economic. I should just put this thing down. Of course, portion sizes are on the increase. If you get a bag of popcorn in the 1950s, that's about the size, relative size of it. Today, this is your average size here, and it's 50 years. If the trend continues, that's so. This is my, and of course the food deserts. We're surrounded by a lot of fast food, and it's very easy to eat fast food, and a lot of people do not know how to cook. They weren't raised on, their parents might not have prepared foods. So this is, I know a lot of you work or have worked in urban areas or live in urban areas, but this is a map of Ohio. And this is sort of a rural map of Ohio, so the metropolitan areas were sort of blocked out, and they're looking at rural access to large grocery stores. And so the green amoebas here scattered throughout the state. These are areas where rural areas where people live within a 10-minute drive of a grocery store. If you're in the white or the tan, you live outside that 10-minute drive. So there's quite a bit of people here, and it's probably of all rural communities, it's probably about half, and that's a little over 1 million or so. But they live in communities that are longer than a 10-minute drive to a grocery store. And these tan areas, they're both more than a 10-minute drive to a grocery store, but within driving distance to a fast food restaurant. So just kind of shows you that rural perspective. Oh, by the way, I work in Piketon, Ohio, which is right here, and it's about an hour and a half south of Columbus. And so I know Susan introduced me as Columbus, but I actually work at a research station in Piketon, Ohio. And it's an interesting place. We do berry research, we do we do research on wine grapes, beer hops. So, yeah. Pumpkins, small fruits, those types of things. So that's where I am. So, you know about food deserts, but we talked that there are physical challenges in terms of accessing nutritious and safe foods in socially acceptable ways. There's also some economic challenges, especially as we saw, fresh produce can be expensive. But if you're on a limited income and you live in one of those food desert rural areas that I talked about, or in the city, you don't have transportation, how does that affect what you buy at the grocery store? Your culture. There's a lot of communities in Ohio. The culture, sort of the norm is pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And so if you grew up in this culture, you're very, the last place you want to be seen at is a food pantry. There's very much, the culture is very resistant to, participating in a food pantry. And certainly chronic disease, it makes a big difference too. We have stories of people that go to a food pantry where they share that they're on medicines to treat type 2 diabetes, and so they're not buying those limited resources go to paying for medicines, and they don't go to buying food. Or sometimes it's vice versa. They might buy food, but they're not paying for the medicines. And so chronic disease can really be a problem in terms of food insecurity. So under that context, I want to talk a little bit about the Choice Food Pantry model that I work with. And it's called the Rainbow of Colors Choice Food Pantry Model. I manage a Facebook page too, where food pantries can share ideas. Choice Food Pantries can share ideas too, so you might be interested in that.
What's it called?
It's called the Rainbow of Colors Choice Food Pantry. It's a Facebook. You type it in on Facebook, it should pop up. I have 114 likes, so maybe by the end today I'll have a few more. But it's really kind of neat. People get on, they share ideas, or sometimes people ask questions. And so it's a great way to share ideas. And so the choice food pantries, we talked about the social ecological model. Choice food pantries fit under that organizational, the organizational component of the social ecological model. So if somebody who is food insecure, sometimes they will go to a food pantry. Often in some communities, a food pantry is the last line of defense for people. It's the last place they might go to. So in a traditional food pantry model, the client receives a pre-selected food or box. So you get what you get, you don't have a fit. That's what I tell my 8-year-old. The volunteer in these traditional models spends most of their time, or his or her time, putting food in a box or a bag. The advantage of a traditional model is that some clients really don't want to choose, and they just want to get in and get out of it. They don't want to really talk to anybody. And so for those types of clients, those types of individuals and families who are food insecure, that might be an ideal situation. Also, there's little or no wait time for a lot of the clients because you just walk in, you get your box, your bag, and then you're out of there. And the disadvantages, though, is that there's less opportunity to interact with clients. And so the volunteer, rather than spending most of the time pre-bagging or pre-boxing foods, there's much more interaction with the clients. And so this can be a good thing, as we'll talk about, or it could be a bad thing. So you think about that social ecological model. This is the interpersonal level right here. So the disadvantage of a traditional pantry, too, is that it can be a very undignified experience for people who use the choice. Okay, and so the example sometimes I give is a person who grew up in the World War II generation, and there aren't too many now that are in that generation. You know, food has meaning, and so if I hand them a bag of beans, for example, that reminds people that that reminds them of their childhood when they didn't have a lot, and beans were seen as the poor man's protein, and so that can be undignified for them. Or it could be the same with dried milk. Dried milk might remind somebody that they're poor, and so it can be an undignified experience. And there's a lot of wasted food, and you see this quite a bit in the traditional pantries. Some examples, say you're illiterate and you're handed a can of corn, okay, and there aren't any pictures on this can. What do you do with it? A lot of times it gets thrown out, okay. Or if you're from a foreign country, you're handed a box of gelatin. You've never seen gelatin before, and so you look at it, it's just powder. Well, what do you do with it? You feed it to the dog and throw it out, We've seen with Latino communities that first-generation immigrants from tropical countries, especially, they've never seen a can of tomatoes, or they had no idea how to use canned vegetables or fruits. They're used to going out in the backyard and picking mangoes from the trees. I mean, really. I was in Costa Rica a few years ago, and we went to a community center. Talked to the cafeteria worker preparing a meal. She was actually squeezing lemons into for juice. And so that was kind of a cultural. That was a good cultural experience for me to see that. But lots of wasted food, traditional pantry. So in the client choice model, it's set up like a grocery store, and the client has the choice. And so the volunteer spends much more time interacting with the clients. The advantage is that because food is chosen by preference and need, there's a lot less waste. We do know anecdotally that the choice model is preferred by both volunteers and most clients, not all clients, but most clients. It offers a dignified experience for some. It's more opportunity for the volunteers to interact with clients, and it could promote long-term food insecurity and health issues. The disadvantage is that it can have, depending on how it's set up and how good the management is, it can have a waiting period. If you have limited volunteers, especially, you have high demand for the pantry, there can be a limited period. Volunteering training is often needed in a choice model, especially around the issues of cultural competency. I'll talk more about that because there are a lot of cultural issues between sometimes not, between volunteers and clients that need to be addressed. I've always said the easiest thing about Choice Pantry is actually setting up a Choice Pantry. That's the easy part. It's the cultural issues that you run into. It's the interpersonal issues that sometimes you run into with Choice Pantry development. Yes?
And, you know, this is mentioned also that most of the pantries seem to be on like church basements that don't have much space, and it does require quite a bit of space to set it up so that you can go around and pick what you need.
Right.
That's often what we see, you know, affecting that ability to choose that.
Yeah, space can be an issue. I've seen pantries run out of closet pretty much. But that's where the management comes in, and you know, the hours of operation that you have. So you have to take into consideration some of these things if you're a Choice Pantry. If you have a high volume of clients and you have limited space, that could be an issue. That could be a real issue. Volunteer management is critical. So if you have a pantry director who's very good at managing people, okay, or sometimes you have cases where you have a pantry director that does not have very good management skills. This can be an issue. We had one pantry I worked with in Southwest Ohio. There was a volunteer who was very, very controlling, not real friendly to clients. Just so happened that her husband was on the food pantry board of directors. So you get into issues like this where, okay, so that person should have been put in the back room, you know, working behind the scenes, not really interacting with clients. But you know, because she had those political connections, it was really hard for the food pantry director to deal with that volunteer. Okay, some clients don't like choice, and we talked about this before. Or in some cases, they've never had choice in their lives, and so it's a new idea for them. But that could also be a disadvantage. So the Rainbow of Colors Choice Pantry addresses food insecurity and nutrition. And so we try to use the MyPlate, which comes from the 2010 dietary guidelines. And how many of you have seen the MyPlate model? Okay, it used to be the old food, you know, the food pyramid. I like this better, although there are some critics. But it does address the food groups. And so we allow families to choose foods based on the MyPlate Food Guidance system, and it's based on household size. So obviously if you have a family of 5, you're going to get more choices than a family of only 2. But the food pantries decide, you know, how many to allow. The number of food choices per household are based on the pantry's inventory and availability. So obviously, if a big issue right now for most food pantries is dairy group, it's always tough. There is a good dairy campaign. Are you aware of the milk campaign? The milk campaign that's really good. We text in. I'll talk about that. But so basically, if you don't have much dairy in your inventory, you don't want to give a lot. You don't want to allow a lot of choices. The commodities are placed on color-coded shelves based on the MyPlate colors, and it draws from social marketing theory. It's not entirely social marketing, but we draw elements from social marketing. I'll talk more about that. So here is a picture. Now this is a little dated. You can see the pyramid in the back. But this is in Oxford, Ohio. And so the client will walk with a food pantry volunteer, and the volunteer will help them make those selections. This is a card that we've used. And so you can see, again, this is outdated again. Our new cards have the MyPlate model, but you've got your food groups, your number of choices. Now, there are 2 nuances because what you do in macaroni sheets has more than one food group or canned stew or something like that. We have meat and vegetables. So yeah, we have two groups. One is the combination group, and this includes like your meal in boxes and a lot of your processed types, hamburger helper, foods that might have more than one food group. And then you've got your yellow group, and this is like your fats, your oils, your ingredients, flour, but also I call them the 4 C's: cookies, cakes, chips, and candies. So if volunteers aren't aware of, if they don't understand, where to put certain foods, a lot of times they'll place them in one of these combination and miscellaneous groups here. Now, sometimes a food like pudding, which it's dairy, but it does have a lot of added sugar. A lot of times pantries will put that in the yellow group, but they won't have any, they won't have any inventory in the dairy group. And so the recommendation would be to just move that pudding over back in the dairy if there aren't any other selections. So the brown and the yellow groups tend to be the food groups that are highly processed. They have most of the added sugars and fats and sodium and that type of thing. So when we train volunteers, we really stress that those groups, when you're walking clients through those aisles, to make sure, you know, if they have type 1, if they have type 2 diabetes, to really focus on those food labels. So this is what a shelf looks like. You'll see that this is vegetables, this is fruits, and each shelf is color-coded. That's really important so that when the client is choosing from the shelves, they're understanding, you know, what food group they're choosing from. And also, we do put lots of posters, MyPlate posters, so they can see that, you know, half of the fruit, half of the foods that you should eat should be fruits and vegetables. So there's our code shelf there. So we really try to integrate nutrition education within the rainbow of color system. We've already talked about the MyPlate model. As they're choosing food, they're learning about the food groups, they're learning about the idea of dietary variety. But really, we really encourage food pantries to have resource tables. They'll have recipes on them, nutrition education information, lots of good USDA nutrition education materials out there. This is a recipe. What we do with our recipes is that we actually categorize the ingredients according to where they belong on the MyPlate model. Again, this is the old pyramid, but you get the idea. So it again reinforces the idea of dietary variety. So our main messages include a variety of food groups and meals and snacks. We want people to understand the MyPlate model and the MyPlate food groups. We did create a DVD which can be played in the waiting areas that reinforce this message, but also also have cooking demonstrations on the video so they learn how to prepare certain foods. The cooking demonstrations have been extremely successful. And in one pantry in Middletown, for example, they were trying to move these big bags of figs, and people just were not putting the figs in the cart. So we did about 3 weeks of cooking demonstrations with figs. And so we made big breads and big puddings. You name it, we made it from figs. But as a result of these demonstrations, we moved about 50,000 pounds of figs. And so just like if you walk into a grocery store and you know, you try one of the samples, and you wouldn't typically buy that food, but since you tried the sample, sometimes they get you to buy the food, right? So the cooking demonstration nutrition workshops have been very successful. Volunteers promoting the MyPlate messages. And so I showed you those cards. There's kind of an evolution. Mid-Ohio Foodbank, they're a choice pantry. They basically have posters. And so they've got the grains and then the family sizes. So they don't have the cards, they have posters. That's kind of what we're moving towards. So the posters actually will have like a nutrition message. So the grains group, for example, make sure half of your grains choices are whole grains. And so the food pantry volunteer can reinforce that message as they're talking to people. What we're trying to do in our choice food pantry volunteer trainings is train volunteers on motivational interview skills. And so that's really gets at finding out what's important to people, what's important in their lives, and then relating those nutrition messages to what's important in people's lives. Any of you studying health behavior theory, social learning theory, and outcome expectancies and that type of thing. Those are really drivers of behavior. So, for example, you know, I'm not going to consume whole grains because I know that 10 years it might prevent a stroke or heart disease. That doesn't influence my decisions. What might influence my decisions is that it fills my belly up. You know, that's one way to promote whole grains. Or if I have grandkids and I want to have more energy to play with my grandkids, then perhaps that message, you could relate those nutrition messages to that value. So we're trying to train food pantry volunteers on motivational interviewing. And then product placement. This is something that's relatively new to me anyway. It's this whole idea that we can sell healthy foods by where they're placed. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Brian Wozniak. Worked with Smarter Lunchrooms and worked a lot on trying to make grocery stores healthier and product placement. But if you put healthier foods at eye level, theory is that people see them, and that's like the easy choice. Or end of the aisle displays. Most of supermarket sales come from those, a good majority of them come from those end of aisle displays. Or if you're having trouble with moving a product like figs, you tack like a little catchy name to these products. Or say this was produced at Uncle Bob's farm, you know, in southern Ohio. And little things like that can really sell certain products. Whole grains tend to be hard to move in choice pantries. And some pantries have actually allowed free choices for the whole grains, so they actually incentivize healthy choices as well. But it's there's lots of little marketing gimmicks and tricks that can be used in terms of the product placement to try and, yes?
I actually, sometimes when I'm getting people like in a choice pantry to make that choice, I'll just explain that brown rice has a skin on it, it's fiber, that when you take it off, it's just, you know, like the starchiness that's left and it's not as much nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people just don't know what the difference is actually, and so when you tell them, they're like, oh, it's that much easier to get that much more fiber? Okay, you know, it's just like a little thing.
Yeah, and another thing that seems to work pretty well is helping clients understand how to pair certain foods together. So if you walk in the grocery store, you walk into the chip aisle. I never walk through the chip aisle, by the way. I mean, I just heard it. Yeah, so you'll be walking through the chip aisle. You'll see the salsa right next to the chips. It's right there, you know. And so volunteers can think about, you know, which foods tend to go with each other, and they can help clients understand, you know, if there's certain foods that, especially certain foods that are hard to move, you can say, hey, you can make a salsa with these ingredients really easily, and that's a very effective way to help clients out as well. So thank you. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about food councils. And so you have a very active food council here up in Cuyahoga County, and councils can support the work of choice food pantries. That's how I'll talk about. But so this is kind of a very generic definition of a food council. It's a group of community stakeholders representing sectors of the food system production through consumption. So includes gardeners, farmers, retail, consumers, cooks, you know, people in waste and recycling. That's an important dynamic there. So and also food pantry. You certainly want the emergency food relief community and food pantry clients involved as well. But the idea is you get a very diverse group of stakeholders to come together. Now, I say food councils not because there are food policy councils that advocate for policies. Not all food councils actually advocate for policy. But again, the food councils address things at the community level, where we talk about choice food pantries addressing things at the organizational level, the social ecological model. Food councils in Ohio. We do not have a state food policy council. Dr. Friedman, I know, is working on one of those issues. We're having these conversations, but we do have food councils scattered throughout the state. And of course, very active one here in Cuyahoga County, but there's some smaller ones where different counties kind of come together to work on food issues. So, what is a food council? Well, it's really a forum for discussing food issues. So, as you know, we have an obesity problem in America, and people really have some concerns about food issues in their community. It could be issues related to lack of grocery stores or lack of access to healthy foods, for example. Food councils will work on projects, and I'll talk about one project that I was involved with in incentivizing choice food pantries. But they may work on establishing community gardens, for example, or incentivizing farmers markets so that people can use EBT cards at farmers markets. So a lot of these food councils are collaborations, and they work on projects in the community. They offer a lot of opportunities for collaboration and coordination between services. And I think it's very important in terms of addressing food insecurity and healthy food access, because a lot of social service agencies, sometimes they work in silos, you know. For example, Butler County, I think one thing we did very successfully was integrate food stamp outreach within the choice food pantries. And so it's kind of expected that the choice food pantries involve food stamp outreach workers. And so if you attend a food pantry, you're going to be exposed to the food stamp outreach worker. But certainly food councils can inform policy at the local, state, and national level. So kind of the eyes and ears, they can advocate for changes that are needed. I know here in Cuyahoga County, they've done a lot of work in terms of zoning, and zoning for gardens, for example. Are you familiar with the work of the
Cuyahoga County Food Policy Coalition?
Mhm.
They do it on that.
So it's a way to inform local, state, national, informing policy at local, state, and national level. Or it could be, in the case of our choice food pantries, it could be working with the food bank. And the food bank is it distributes the commodities. And so if there's if a food pantry, for example, is not, it's really having trouble stocking dairy, this could be, the food council could advocate on behalf of the food pantries for certain foods. So I worked with a food council with the Shared Harvest Foodbank in Butler County. Kind of, as I said, that's how I got started on the Choice Food Pantry, my Choice Food Pantry work. And so it was a bunch of food system stakeholders came together, but it was programs managers, it was farmers, it was food pantry directors, and they came up with a system, this rainbow color system. I should mention too that there are many different types of choice. There's free choice, but this is a system that we came up with. And so they also established a set of best practices, and they established a monitoring system. It was an opportunity for network and collaboration. And so this set of best practices, basically, we looked at the literature, we talked to food pantry directors, and they were kind of informing us, what they were seeing and some things they wanted to work on and what they wanted to be held accountable for. I talked about some of the controlling volunteers. When you switch over to a choice model, some volunteers really have trouble. They have trouble giving up that sense of control. And so we had a food pantry, and one of our food pantries had a couple volunteers that just would not allow clients to choose. They had to do the choosing off the shelf, okay? So we actually, one of our best practices we identified was that clients had to physically choose the food off the shelf and put it in their basket. And this is really important, but it was really hard for some of the food pantries. We also expected that food pantry clients attend training on nutrition, so that as they walked through the aisles with clients, that they could talk to them about healthy choices, so they could help them with, understand labels, and those motivational interviewing skills were important as well. We also required that our choice pantries work with other services, other social services, like the food stamp outreach. That was an expectation. So we tried to coordinate those services within the pantries themselves. And these are all expectations of our choice food pantries. And so we actually developed 3 levels of choice. There was like the sprout level, there was the seed, and then there was the harvest level. And so based on how you scored on those criteria, placed you into one of those groups. And we had incentives, we incentivized each of those categories. So the top, the harvest level, got the best selection of food from the food bank. And so essentially I would go in with another choice food pantry director, and we would go in and we would score the pantries. And it was good because I was sort of that consistent presence on the scoring teams. But then the food pantry director, the other food pantry director scoring another pantry, could offer some practical advice for improving the choice pantry. It was kind of interesting. There were personality conflicts at times, we had to deal with, but that was the system that was developed by this particular food council. Yes?
Was this something that at the Shared Harvest Foodbank that they communicated to their pantry network that was going to happen?
Yes.
And so it was a very transparent process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was it like on all counties that the food bank?
Yeah, so all counties were allowed to participate if they chose to.
Okay.
So it's kind of voluntary.
So it wasn't mandatory?
No. But, the incentives were pretty, we had good participation because of the incentives. But I will say that, some pantry directors are on board, but their volunteers weren't necessarily on board with a lot of the things.
What were some of the incentives that you offered?
There were certain commodities, they would allow better selection. I used to call Tina so she could tell you more about the incentives. But they would get the first orders in, things like that from for certain commodities. So they would get better selection of food, but they're on that top tier.
I see. Okay.
So, yep.
So training can be a pretty expensive process. Where do you recommend one would look to get some sort of, support to make that happen?
For what, for training?
Training volunteers and things like that to make that happen.
Well, I offer training throughout the state, but I have extension colleagues that I work with here too, so that's something that I do have costs, like the mileage and some of my time, but that's something that I do. But certainly extension can offer those types of, maybe health departments. I worked with several health departments that were training volunteers, but so. How am I doing on time, Susan, now?
About another 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
Maybe we open it up for questions. We have questions coming through.
So I want to talk about the cultural issues. And this is big. There are invisible walls between the community, the food pantry, staff, volunteers, and clients as well. And a lot of the issues that we see between, some of the issues that we see between clients and volunteers, sometimes they're generational issues. When you have senior volunteers with younger food pantry clients. Sometimes their volunteers can be really judgmental. And case in point, somebody who weighs 400 pounds walks in and chooses a birthday cake. And we had one situation where she felt really, really terrible. There were some volunteers that made her feel really terrible. And the point is that, you don't, and what we tell the volunteers, you don't know what she's using that birthday cake for. Maybe it's a daughter that has, that's having a birthday. And this is we have some pantries where the one pantry in particular had a very highly educated volunteer base, and so and everybody's a nutrition expert too. So that's most of the time when I work with volunteers, I'm trying to educate them about nutrition and how to give sound nutrition advice. But then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where you have people have a lot of education. In case they might be doctors in some ways, but they're the experts and they have a certain they want to promote some diet, or they want to shame clients to not choosing this food or that food. And the problem is with that is that people might not want to come back to the pantry if they have a really bad experience, and so you miss that opportunity. We want people to become food insecure eventually, but then again, we don't want them to feel embarrassed or shamed. So we have some of those issues going on as well that we have to deal with. With our cultural diversity training, what we try to help people is understand that about 60 to 70% of how we communicate is nonverbal. And so how you think about a particular group that's different than your own culture influences how you communicate. We have some activities that try to get volunteers to become aware of their own biases and how those biases can influence how you communicate with somebody. And so, especially in churches, a lot of the volunteers, good-hearted people. Well, I follow the golden rule. What's the problem with the golden rule? Anybody know the problem with the golden rule? My golden rule might be different than yours or yours. And so, we see this especially with Caucasian volunteers and Hispanics. In a lot of Latino cultures, for example, it's a sign of disrespect if you look at elder in the eye. And so, if I'm following my golden rule and I'm a senior and I look at and somebody from a Latino, maybe a Latino immigrant walks into the pantry is not looking me in the eye, I might be offended, But if I wasn't aware of that cultural practice, I might get really frustrated. So, depending on what the issues are, we can kind of tailor the cultural diversity training. Another thing related to culture relates to the food councils. And I showed you the map of all those wonderful food councils in Ohio. A lot of food councils work on food insecurity issues. But what they fail to do is represent the food insecure community. So, you know, I don't want to stereotype, but I am going to. A lot of food councils have highly educated people, which is fine. But a lot of them are crusaders for one cause or the other. And I'm not going to get into organic. I mean, it's a lot. So, for example, they might be very much interested in local or organic, and that's what they want to promote in the communities. And they want, you know, they might have a goal where they're going to improve healthy food access. And so they start an organic farmers market, you know. But they do so without really engaging with people who are food insecure and really listening to what their needs and what their concerns are. And so that's really something that we need to work on. And actually, the hunger relief community, I think this is maybe something, are you involved with the Cuyahoga County Food Policy Council at all? Mm-hmm. That's atypical. And so we need to have more hunger relief, more of the hunger relief community represented on the food councils. But that being said, food pantry directors might not represent their clients really that well. And so kind of gets into the bread knife example. They wouldn't have known that their clients, a lot of the initial reaction of volunteers, for example, in food pantry directors, well, the volunteers don't want to cut the bread. They're lazy. That's what the volunteers would tell us. And so somebody finally said, well, why don't we ask the clients why they're not choosing the bread? So the food pantry director, the staff, volunteers might not be necessarily representative of people that are food insecure. And so sometimes, I mean, ideally, we like food pantry staff, food bank staff to be represented on the food councils, but even better would be actual client representation. And so then the question becomes, you know, you have a couple people who are food insecure sitting on a food council and helping make decisions. Are they really representative? And so then it begs the question, okay, how do you represent people that are food insecure? And often those are marginalized voices. Mm-hmm. So there are these invisible walls between community, organizations, volunteers, and finally clients. And so breaking down these invisible walls and having this sort of this open discussion about policies and systems and environments and these types of things are really important. Our Voices for Food project is working with rural communities, and we're setting up food councils to work with choice food pantries. So we're trying to start food councils that collaborate with the food pantries, and the challenging thing is to have that representation on the councils from the food insecure communities, but also food pantry staff and volunteers. So we're trying to facilitate dialogue between the food system actors in the community, and then the food pantry staff and volunteers, and then the clients working together to address issues like healthy food access in some of these rural areas. So I've said a lot, and I'm sure some of you might have some questions about things.
We've got a little bit of time for a couple of questions. Is there any?
Darcy?
So a lot of the food available in the food pantry is related to this food system that overproduces really unhealthy things. Have we seen a shifting of availability of the healthier products in the past decade? So it's easier for pantry to supply a healthy product?
Mid-Ohio, I would say, I don't know about you guys. Yeah, because that'd be great. So Mid-Ohio has a really wonderful fresh fruit and vegetable policy, and they're doing a really good job about getting like fresher produce to the food pantries. So I think there is a shift now. A lot of my work with choice pantries, I don't really have that evidence, but we are with our large multi-state grant. We're actually doing food pantry inventories, looking at after the choice pantry gets set up. You know, we're looking at baseline, and then 2 years after, and then 5 years afterwards. And so we're seeing if the inventories improve in terms of healthier, food products. But we're also doing 24-hour dietary recalls. And so not only are we looking at if fresher and healthier foods are available, is it having an impact on people's dietary quality, on overall dietary quality? So I don't know, do you guys want to talk about your programs?
Sure. So my name is Jessica Morgan, and I work at the Greater Food Institute, and Ari is our nutrition manager, and Missy's our compliance coordinator. So we've got a list of people for if anybody has any questions. But In terms of the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, we offer fresh produce for free for our member agency network. So our agency network consists of food pantries, hot meals, shelters, kids programs, and adult programs.
Yeah, you want my mic?
No. I just don't like when my back is to people. And so we distribute food to food pantries, hot meal shelters, kids programs, adult programs, and then they distribute that food to people in need. Fresh produce is free for our member agency network, which means they order it and it doesn't cost them anything. We have a mobile pantry program where we can bring a truck of fresh produce and other perishable products into a community that needs it. That program is free. There's no cost to the agency.
Who pays that cost?
So we get funding from different sources. We get grants that help cover some of those overhead costs. We do get reimbursement for TPAT products, which is the USDA MyPlate products from the federal and state government. But we also have a nutrition policy, and I don't know, Ari, you want to talk a little bit about our nutrition policy? And like, what is it, 80% of the food that we distribute is supposed to be healthy?
Yeah,
right?
I think it's like 85%. Yeah, so that's okay.
Have you come up front so you're getting recorded as well?
Oh.
Sorry, Ari.
That's okay. Has anyone heard of the Choosing Healthy Options program? So basically what it is, it's a program that all top 1 program or foods are healthy, nutritious, you should choose them more often, down to 3, which is like don't choose very often. So basically all of our foods at the food bank are top 1 or 2, meaning that they're healthier foods, and our policy is 85% of those will be healthy.
Could you give some examples of 1 and 2 items now?
Yeah.
Because I think the sense of what you're saying and what Darcy's talking about are probably a little bit far apart. Okay.
Well, it depends. It depends really on like added sugars, added salt, the iron, the vitamins. All of those are kind of rated on a specific scale and kind of given numbers. And so based on 100 calories, that's how it's rated. So it can be for canned goods, frozen products, or fresh. All the fresh produce is a top 1. And then the frozen and the canned can also be rated. It just depends on what is kind of added into them or what they have. So does that answer your question?
So a lot of what the product is at the food bank is canned food and produce and prepared packaged food that's donated from the...
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixture of all of those.
So the food bank, we get our food from a couple of different sources. We get it from the federal and state government. We purchase the product directly from vendors, so we use our funds to buy products, and that cost is passed along to our agency network, but it is a reduced cost. And then we get products donated. So we're getting it from a couple of different sources, and there's various cost
So
breakdowns.
typical protein sources of the food bank are this turkey sausage, like we were talking about, you have some there. What are the others?
So we have
typical dairy product or typical fruits and vegetables.
Sure.
Where do you find a lot of the fruits, the vegetables, are the root vegetables that are more storable. So the question about the dark green leafy vegetables and how often those are available, they aren't that available. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
No, I think it's because they're so highly perishable and we haven't found a good way to address that.
Yeah, if you introduce yourself, because I think it's important. I know for myself, I get very confused here.
Yeah. Under Network of Greater Cleveland is an organization of pantries and soup kitchens. We coordinate their operations, and we raise money and pay for food that we buy at food bank produce from us. Okay.
And I coordinate a wellness program in the center.
So when you're talking about the quality of nutrition and the food and how it's changed, it changed with the addition of produce substantially, which didn't used to be there.
Right.
Like, and that's coming from the state
Perishable,
of Ohio,
perishable.
from using a can of dollars for produce, right?
Well,
Does it come from the federal government?
No, we purchase directly from farmers, so we're getting funding from various sources. And some of the produce we get comes from the state, through the state program, but a lot of the produce that we receive is purchased from food bank money that we get from various grants in the community that help support our healthy food initiative.
So you would have more direct control over that than, for example,
Right.
state produce choices.
Correct.
lot of times at the local level, the food pantries will rely on the food bank for a majority of their product, but they'll also get like a Walmart will donate, or Kroger will donate a lot
A
of
bunch of
food.
cakes and chips.
That's where a lot of the junk comes from, are these.
So you don't want to say no, because then they might have a produce donation the next day. So how do you balance that out? If
It's
somebody's
very
talking
tricky.
about clean.
It's very tricky. So we have a produce or product resource development team that works directly with some of those vendors. And if somebody, we have this food nutrition advisory committee, we have a nutrition policy. And so while we're not saying no to donations at this point,
You're not promoting it. and saying,
we're
"Hey,
not, right. So if somebody says, hey, we want to donate, 5 skids of 2-liter Coke,
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, we might say, that's great, we'll take that, but here's a copy of our nutrition policy. Do you have any, healthy juices or water or other products that, because we still want to have that relationship with that vendor. That's very important, that we have those relationships in the community. But we want to educate our vendors as well about what is.
So do we have choice, how many choice pantries do we have in the city?
In the city, I'm not sure that I have a number on that. What I can tell you is that the food bank has a 6-county service territory, and in those 6 counties, we have about 225 pantries, and a little over half are choice. And I think most of the Hunger Network sites.
A lot of the Hunger Network sites are still in the tiny basements and street pantries, but what they have is sort of a semi-choice pantry.
Sure.
Because they want to give the clients choice of things that they have 2 or more items of.
Sure.
So they don't end up with 85 peanut butters in
Right.
there.
So it's not it's not a go up and down the aisle kind of thing. They have sort of basic items that they have one of, and then they
Sure.
add these other things in.
Sure.
So being
So
the
it's kind of-
PRC, with the R being a little R here, how much of this has been studied? I just think that we're just, it sounds like,
Yeah.
you just said that half of them are choice, half of them are not. That's like a study
There's been, most of it's been like qualitative, like focus groups and getting people's
Well, even
opinions.
going,
but it's not-
looking at all these things that just came up, all these are empirical questions that if there's
Yeah.
actually an ability to study, and even to study these hybrids, or what do you do when there's a church that doesn't have the space, and what are the factors? Have you done this? I mean, this would be a great
Well,
collaboration.
I had a food policy group at Cleveland State, and Michelle Kaiser actually, Dr. Kaiser was part of
Yep, I published a paper with,
I saw she was publishing those studies. So she came to CSU, and we brought some clients in, and we did a study too, talking about food insecurity, what people are struggling with, how they meet those needs, and sort of like more like at the individual community level, what that experience is. And I think that she's working on kind of coordinating that.
Is she's at Cleveland State?
She's at Ohio
Oh,
State.
she's
She was part of my
yeah.
Cleveland State food policy student group.
Okay.
she's doing a lot of work with food deserts in the Columbus area, and mapping
Okay.
food deserts and that type of
So we
thing.
coordinated
That's
the
something
study.
we can talk about.
Yeah.
Definitely, because
Yeah.
Because usually when
We
these
should all
kind
work
of
together.
things
the
come out,
challenges
they'll
of food
continue.
choice pantries, to me, there are physical, there are
Yep.
the cultural challenges, but there's also whether or not there's much to choose from.
Right.
And this is where it gets to the readiness, community readiness to embark on that. Because there's a lot of things you gotta think about, and sometimes, this incentive program we set up, the Shared Harvest, there were some food pantries that shouldn't have been choice.
Right.
They didn't have enough control, volunteers weren't ready for it, and the director said, you're gonna go choice, but you like it or not.
Right.
Um,
So they're not gonna even be happy about how they're doing what they do. in order.
Some of that can be addressed through coaching, but, there's a lot of, assessment that needs to happen, yeah, sorry.
I'm a volunteer worker at my church, and just so happened, y'all talking about this, but we do a choice. And
What church?
they, Mount Sinai Baptist Church, and we set up a cart, and we put 3 bags on there, and we go around with the client, with the customer, and we go from station to station to station, and they tell us, do you want, which juice you want? You want grape juice, orange juice, or this juice? You want, what type of soup you want? Vegetable soup, this soup, or this soup? You want beef? And a lot of times they'll get to the corn and go, oh, I got plain corn. I don't want no more corn.
Yeah.
You want some rice? I don't want no rice. I got plain rice. And I'd be amazed. I'd be like, wow, they turning down. They'd be like, oh no, I don't need no more string beans. I got plenty of string beans. And they'll go around. Then I get them, and I go, hey, we only filled up 1 bag. You don't even filled up the 3 bags that we have. And some people maybe fill up the 3 bags, or I need everything, you know. And then some people maybe fill up 2 bags, some of them fill 1 bag, some of them fill up the whole 3 bags. But you'd be amazed of the people that turn down the stuff when you go around and just, oh no, I got too many of this, I don't need no more peanut butter.
Maybe they're getting it from other, maybe.
Or they're laughing. Right, and then, or they'll say, but they be the regulars that comes once a month, and they say, oh no, I got this last month, and I don't need no more, because my kids didn't eat up the peanut butter last month, or something like that. And it'd be amazing, when they do have a chance to choose, they don't overpick, they don't overpick, or, no, I don't like blueberries, I don't even want no more blueberries, or, you know, and they'll go around, and they'll pick, and I like it, the way that they choose.
I think the empirical question, another question is just this idea of matching the color to the nutrition versus just choice would be fascinating to see whether that really did, you know, and when, and under what conditions does that really influence choice?
Well, theoretically, you know, at least it gets the food pantries thinking about, okay, I don't have enough dairy, I need to really try and get more dairy, you know, so there's choices in this food group. So it gets some thinking about the food groups too. But also that brown group and the yellow, you know, typically in a lot of these local pantries, that's majority of choices, you know. The thing is that with the brown and the yellow groups, it sort of gets them to think about, okay, I need to provide healthy choices in the main groups, you know, but those brown and yellow, that's where everything kind of gets thrown. So, you know, I don't know, you know, how that impacts people's overall dietary quality too, but yeah.
We had talked about the idea of having a group of people interested in doing research related to a lot of what we talked about today, staying after if you're interested today and talking with Dan a little bit more, and mainly I think getting names on a list, and then thinking about, you know, potentially having a further conversation. So if you are, why don't we just kind of touch base in the middle of 10?
Great, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is that coming up September 9th, we do have these kind folks presenting, and the topic of that, and it'll be focused on the Hunger Network, and the Stay Well program in particular, and hearing about that. But so you know, this is a topic of interest. We have another session planned that will be coming up, but. I think this is a good time to transition. If there are folks that would like to stick around for a little bit or maybe an extended bit, we can do that either down here or up in the conference room upstairs on the 4th floor. But before we wrap up, I want to thank everybody for coming. This has been a terrific conversation, and please join me in thanking Dr. Remley for a great presentation. And I'll just remind you that next month, May, we're not going to be meeting here, but we have 2 special sessions. The other session that's coming up in June that will be of great interest is our peer program and the peer. We have our